Hi, I want to talk about dissociation. I've dissociated a lot in my life. When I was a kid, more so than now, I would space out a lot. And the spacing out would be like I would disappear and the world would disappear. And but I would see these impossible shapes and colors and patterns that the mind couldn't identify. The left brain isn't online at that moment, or at least so I believe. And there'd just be nothing going on. And I could only remember that just vaguely as I would come back. And I didn't really notice it at first because it seemingly has been always a feature of my life. And I'm pretty sure what's going on is that early on when I was a baby, I was cried out and I essentially abandoned and left to cry myself out and figure out how to cope with the feeling of the despair that infant me felt by being not having its needs met. And this mind learned how to just disappear, just to disappear. And so because it was just so traumatic and hurtful, I don't blame my parents. I'm sure if I was a parent, I'd actually, especially like back in the 20s when my parents had me, if I had kids, I probably would have been a worse parent. So I'm not throwing stones. They didn't have the resources to give me what my needs needed. Actually, it's the nuclear family that kind of lends itself to this kind of trauma, because people used to be in a tribe, and often a lot of like the older ladies who have insomnia would help take care of the children, and so the parents could get more sleep. Most likely, we lived in a tribe. Now we're in a little kingdom of our own. The house kingdom. The man is the king of his castle. Anyway, so I learned to tune out, to just disappear, and this would happen a lot. I remember one time it was at school, and I remember tuning out and going to that place with all these shapes and colors and stuff. And then when I came back, I thought, oh my God, did anybody see that? Did anybody see me losing control, tuning out? And I don't think anybody did, but I freaked out. So I remember telling myself, okay, you got to make sure you're always here. You're always here. And then I started, like, this was when the monkey mind like really had this big imperative to, she's constantly on the treadmill, constantly thinking this, that, the other thing, singing something, tapping something, doing anything. I'll constantly be active because you must not quiet things down, because you may go into this dissociative state. I didn't know what it was back then, and people might see it and then laugh at you, and then you will feel shame, and you will be annihilated. That's the fear, being cast out of the tribe. But those were more mild dissociations. And as I got older and older and older, I still would dissociate, but they would become more shallow and shorter. And only upon really working on trauma did I start noticing them the last few years, because I really didn't notice them. But they were much more shallow later on. But one time I had this real big fugue state when I was in 3rd grade. I remember there was this assignment that you were supposed to write a story, a fictional story. And so I came up with this idea of like a metal girder, a mysterious metal girder in this construction site. And I was just copying 2001, right, with the monolith, because my dad was all into 2001. And I was just copying it, and and as I was explaining, the teacher was kind of like helping me walk through the story creation process. And I could, like, in my mind, I thought, she's seeing that I'm copying this. She's seeing that I'm a faker and I'm inauthentic. And I'm not using these words, of course, but I feel exposed and vulnerable. And this is absolutely intolerable. And I start saying, I don't know. And then blank. And the next thing I remember is like the next day, and they're shipping me off to this Christian academy. We weren't Christians, or at least not that denomination, but it was a private school that my grandparents were going to be paying for. My brother was already there. So I started going to that. But the thing of it is I don't remember what happened after that. I don't, in the classroom, or that night, or the following morning. And the thing of it is now, of course, that was a long time ago. You wouldn't, right? You wouldn't remember it. But I didn't remember it back then. That's the thing. That was the only time I had like a real fugue state. But the interesting thing now for me is that, as far as I can tell, I haven't dissociated since November 3rd, 2024. And the only evidence, of course, I have is that there's no breaks in my memory. And I don't remember ever seeing those shapes and colors. So it's progress, right? I think that's progress. I'm hoping, of course, there is hope here, that there will be like compound interest, in growth, in healing, and that one day I'll be able to like go out that door and actually like not be afraid. I mean, there's still all this fear here. I was thinking about like some walls I put up. I put up all these walls. This is a social avoidant personality here, but there's all these walls, and I'd like them gone. And what kind of life would I live if there wasn't so much fear here? I keep wanting to say if I wasn't so afraid, but I'm reminded that it's the fear in here. It's in this organism. There's no real good conclusion to this video, I guess. All I can say is that healing trauma, the spiritual search, striving to better oneself, preferably not at the expense of anybody else. Actually, absolutely required, because that just hurts you in the end. You may not know that, but it's worth it. And also, I just want you to know that I want you to know that I know that this is still a work in progress. All right. Thanks for watching all the way through. If you did, that means the world to me. And if you didn't, you didn't hear this.